everybody. Welcome back to Thoughts on a Thursday. This is episode 8, and I'm super excited about this episode. It's going to be on interviews. I'm your host, Jenn Hernandez, and with me, as you guys can see, or if you're listening, we have new friends joining us for this next set of episodes. So we're going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves. Go ahead, Alyssa.
Hi everyone, my name is Alyssa and I'm a student from University of San Francisco, Orange County campus.
What's good, y'all? My name is Didier and I go to Long Beach State University.
How's it going, everyone? My name is Gregory and I currently go to University in Long Beach.
Yeah, so me, Didi, and Greg are all at the Cal State Long Beach sports management program, and as Alyssa said, she's at the sports management program at USF. So super excited to have you guys here. It's Thanksgiving week. How are you guys feeling?
I'm excited for the days off.
Excited. See the family.
Yeah,
Should be good.
I know. Cool. Okay, so this episode, we're talking about interviews. I kind of wanted to look up some stats. And so, according to the Sports Business Postgraduate Rankings in 2022, which was based off the classes of like 2018, 2019, is how they do their research, it shows that 57% of graduates from a postgraduate program get full-time jobs within 12 months after graduating within the sports industry. So I thought that number was kind of high and like interesting. And then the other one I wanted to highlight was that 10% get a full-time job outside of the sports industry. So kind of just knowing that, we wanted to talk about the interview process. What has been your guys' experience with the interview process within the sports industry?
Yeah, I'll take this one. As somebody who just restarted, I should say, the process of interviewing, it's definitely a different sort of preparation for me. I know that it's a very extensive process with some organizations, so you kind of have to be ready to go through multiple rounds of interviews. But at the same time, you have to understand that you're going to be meeting different people within the org. So your first interview may be a questionnaire. That's considered round 1. Then you get moved on to an in-person interview with HR. And then you're probably going to meet with a few professionals from whatever department you're applying for. But from my experience, it's definitely about a month to a month and a half of a process once you get a call back from your application being submitted.
Yeah, what
That's
about you,
fair.
Didi?
I think I've had examples on both ends of the spectrum. There are in some cases where the interview process went really quick. Like we got 3 interviews done, I think it was within a 2-week span, and then I was hired within that month. And then there was other examples where I put in an application, forgot about it, and then the organization replied back to me 2 months later. And then even the interview process took a little bit where I didn't get hired up until a month later or whatever the timeline may be. So it kind of depends on the urgency on the organization and how fast they need someone. It's like if they need someone right away, they'll get someone right away. But if they don't feel like it's a necessity, they might take their time on it or kind of weigh out their options. So that's kind of been like my experience with it. What about you, Greg?
For me, my interview process and experience with that so far, it's been good. Most of them have been group orientated, and my results have came back pretty quick. That can be challenging depending on your personality. For me, I prefer one-on-ones because I feel like they allow you to showcase your character, your abilities better.
Group interviews
Also,
are literally the worst.
right, you have to stand out. Most of these interviews, you'll be asked questions by more than one team member, kind of what Alyssa said. And basically, because you'll be working directly with those sports professionals, so that's why they do that. During these interviews, they're trying to figure out what type of person you are and if you fit the vision that they want, and that's kind of what I've encountered. And just kind of what qualities and just seeing what those expectations look like.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's been different, like depending on the size of the company. I've had some interviews with like smaller sport businesses and then like obviously the bigger organizations. And I mean, I think sports and entertainment, because I've had some like non-related sports interviews. Um, and yeah, just piggybacking off what you guys have said, it is very common to have those multiple interviews, um, which is frustrating because sometimes they can go fast, like Didi said, and like sometimes they just,
Right, right.
they're moving along the process quickly. And then I was also very into one that was a four-piece interview. It was kind of like peer-to-peer meeting with the manager and then the director, after have meeting with HR. So it was technically like five. Um, and everything was going so well, and then at the end, like, it was a no. So it's
That
like,
happens,
Oh
and
man.
man.
That
I
happens.
know, and that's why it's kind of like you're weighing, like, you know you have to try to keep your options open, but obviously it's like you're going through this 4 or 5 interviews, like you're hoping that something's going to come out of it, and then you never know. So but yeah, I think it's definitely different. I also have realized, like, sometimes I expect the interview to be so much more intense, and then
Hmm.
it's way more relaxing. Like, it's way more chill,
100%.
And one thing
You
I
know,
wanted,
Jen,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, just to piggyback on that, a lot of the times I feel like that first interview specifically, they're just kind of see what kind of personality you have. They don't really
Hmm.
care about the technical stuff. They're just trying to see if you're a good person, if you'll mesh with their culture, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe that's why we can overthink it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But to that, I think, like,
Mm-hmm.
because I can very easily, like, be like, oh, this is chill. So I, like, automatically, like, guard comes down, and
Take the
it's
foot
like,
off the pedal, huh?
yeah.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so for me, that's my biggest thing, where like I have to check myself in interviews, because I'm like, okay, even though I may come in and the it was like a three person in-person interview, and it was way
Hmm.
more relaxed. Like, I think I relaxed a little too much. So just like coming in with reminding yourself that even though, the situation may be a little bit more, like, you can still be yourself and show who you are, even if it is that initial interview. But I think because the industry is so competitive, and especially if it's for like a position that you're really wanting to go for, like, you just like Didi said, like, you need to be foot down all the way, all gas, no brakes. Like, I
Hmm.
think that's like the most important thing that I've taken away, like, from my own journey when it comes to like interviews in the sports industry.
For sure.
Okay. I wanted to touch on
Agreed.
something because I think it's very important just to add a little bit of perspective. And I know, Jen, you talked about it earlier, and I think Didi, you kind of echoed it a little bit. But when you go through multiple rounds of interviews, you have to remember that they're bringing you along because you're qualified, right? You have the qualifications that they're looking for. However, because not every interviewee is the same, one person may hold a little bit more than the other, but that still doesn't disqualify you from a potential opportunity that's right, around the corner. Because I'm currently in the process and I've made it through multiple rounds, and I like, it's just a kind of like a note to say, hey, look, I'm qualified for this position. However, given the circumstances of the interview process and my current situation, they may not pick me. So that
Hmm.
doesn't discourage me, that shouldn't discourage me or disqualify me from applying to similar roles like the
Absolutely.
one that I'm currently in. So for anybody that's maybe going through that interview perspective or that interview process, like, just keep that in mind, that you're getting strung along because they think you're a qualified candidate for the role. However, it can be start dates, it can be compensation, it can be, you know, based off the depth of your knowledge for whatever, position you're applying for. But there's always going to be something that's going to leverage you and the other person applying. So if you get to offer letter stage and they deny you, don't take it as harshly as it may feel, because that just proves that you're more than qualified to apply for a different position with another organization.
Yeah, that's so true. I love that. How do you guys feel your program that you're in has like helped set you up or support you throughout, like, for the interview process in the sports industry? Greg.
All right, I'll go ahead and take this one. I just feel the program kind of supported me for the interview process, kind of starting with like informational interviews. You know, you getting that information from your sports professionals, kind of picking their brain because they were once in our shoes. So, like, why not get it from the source? I feel like preparing for the type of questions you'll be asked in an interview, you'll never know what they're going to ask. But what you can do is prepare by doing your own research and looking in and knowing a little bit about the company you're putting yourself into.
Agreed.
Also, I think that basically your resume as well. That's super important that they emphasize, you know, trimming that down to one page because you want the meat and potatoes on there, your sports experience that's more relevant to what's, you know, you're applying for. So that's super key. You know, they're not even going to get to probably the second page, so don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Overall, overall, I
Hurt,
do feel
doesn't it?
it does. Even though you have all that experience, they're just going to want to
And you're like,
see like
but
the
wait,
first
I
couple
worked at
things. So
Chick-fil-A in 2002. Like, you don't want to know that?
right, and they're looking for what you know applies to their vision and what aligns with what they you know see fit for the role. But overall, I feel like the program did prepare me well for the interview, kind of what to expect and kind of what to ask, or you know knowing what's the next step after. So I think moving forward, I'll be prepared for those higher positions. What about you, Alyssa? Or is it?
I mean, you hit the nail on the head, I guess, is the only way that I can put it. But I think that my program is very much similar to what Greg had explained. But something else that I think that I just picked up from my program, and this can apply to any industry, not necessarily the sports industry, but like the preparation starts when you're applying. Like even before that, right? You could do your research, you could do the informational interviews, but if you really look at the job description, you can tailor your resume to be considered more fit. No, that doesn't make sense. You can tailor your resume to be a possible candidate for interviews, right? So one of the very first I guess you could say workshops that I did in my professional development class at my program was to one, look at the job description and look at the job application and highlight what experience you have, right? Whether you highlight it different colors, the same color, just no, put a little star next to it, right? And then fit those job descriptions and those qualifications into your resume. You don't have to copy it and paste it, but you know, if the application says must be able to run an annual tournament every year, you're going to want to put in your resume, obviously given your experience, can run 4 annual tournaments yearly, right? So that way they know that the word tournament is in there, the word annual is in there, and you have some sort of experience to back that up. So just make sure that when you're starting the application process, you're looking at those key details and you're applying it to your
Yeah,
resume.
hitting those keywords for
What about
sure.
you, Didi?
And just to chime in on what you said, Alyssa, I do think like if you don't meet all the requirements, don't be afraid to apply. You don't have to meet everything to a T.
Agreed.
As long as you hit some of those points and you know you show your you know your personality and you know kind of who you are as a person. Plus that, I feel like you can still have a good shot at getting those jobs. So don't feel discouraged if you don't meet all those requirements.
Definitely. And I think for anybody just applying to any job, as long as you have 75% of what the application is asking for,
Mm-hmm.
apply. You like just literally apply. You don't have to have
Go
a full
for it.
100%. You don't have to have a full 80%. Like I think the minimum, don't quote me. I mean, like I'm not completely sure, right? But
Right.
I think the average is like as long as an applicant has 75% of the job description on their resume,
They'll look at
they
you.
can potentially
Yeah.
be considered, yeah, for an interview.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Didi, what about you?
Man, I would say since the start of this program, I've probably interviewed more than I've ever interviewed in my life to different organizations and different internships, et cetera, et cetera. And honestly, practice makes perfect. The more you do it, the more you get comfortable with it. When I first started, man, I used to sweat through my shirt. Like now it's another day at the office. Like an interview is just another conversation. But I would say the biggest, I guess, piece of advice that the program has taught me was just this last class. Shout out to Professor Aaron Arak. He's the man. He told us to do a 30-60-90 plan going into an interview. What that is It's kind of a presentation of everything that you're going to do within the first 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days. And the way that you tailor that is you take the job description of the job that you want and kind of, again, create the presentation. For example, if in the job description is you got to sell, right? Maybe within the first 30 days, you're going to get your first sale. Within 60 days, you're going to get a couple of more. And within 90 days, you're going to hit an X number. And I believe that will show them something much more tangible than just a conversation. And that'll set you apart. And that helped me out for sure in getting my full-time job. So a big shout out to Professor Aaron.
Yeah, I mean, I think.
Yeah, I really.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I really liked that idea when he brought it up in class. Didier, when we were together, I was like, wow, it just kind of took me for a ride. I was like, I never heard that before. So
Dude,
I'm
it sets
pretty
you
sure
apart. Like
it
both
does.
of the people that I presented to, they both have told me that none of their candidates have ever done it. And
See?
it was like, it brings something more than just a conversation, because everyone can bring a conversation to the table,
Yeah,
right?
shout out Professor Aaron for that one for sure. I think that that's like such
Definitely.
a key like piece, because especially, we're trying to break into the industry. So it's like you may not have that experience, but like creating something like that is just like you're literally highlighting, like your hard skills, soft skills, like all in one of like, and you're like acting
Absolutely.
like the owner, which like every company wants to see that. And I think that like at whatever level like you may be interviewing at, if you're bringing that to the table, obviously, like Didi said, like it's gonna set you apart, but like you're gonna be taken like serious. You know what I mean? So it's like even if they
Absolutely.
don't give you the job, like you may even be considered for a different role, because they're like so impressed with that piece. So it's like that was super. That advice Professor Aaron gave was like that's a great one to keep in your pocket.
So sorry to cut you off, Jen, but there was a time in my professional career, I guess, where I left sales for like a month, right? And then I applied for a ticket operations position with the Kings. And I did the 30, 60, 90-day plan. I didn't get the job, right? But within the rejection email, I'll never forget it, what she told me. She goes, "We're so sorry we went with a different candidate, et cetera, but your presentation was excellent. I think you would make a great salesman." Like, even though I did not get that job, she kind of reassured the fact, like, wow, maybe I should go back to that realm and kind of like explore the possibilities of a full-time career within that. So yeah, just like you said, it'll keep them thinking about you. Like, even if they deny you, they know what you bring to the table.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I've said it before, where like an interview is literally the time where you can talk most about yourself. Like literally, I think it's so important I mean, for me to answer the question, like I feel like the program has set us up with just like those developing confidence within ourselves and like our brand, but also like being able to speak. So like those group projects and stuff that we all like aren't necessarily fans of, and like coming to present and stuff. I think even though it's not necessarily an interview type of setting, I think like that's only helping, the process of like you gaining that confidence in yourself and like being able to speak. And so, which I think are like skills that are important when it
Definitely.
comes to an interview. Um, but yeah, I mean, I just want to touch on the fact of like, because I need to hear this for myself too, is like when you're interviewing, like take time to like, not only look at the job description, do all your research on the company, things like that, who you're interviewing with, but get a list together of like all your hard skills, soft skills, like work samples, of like literally, and just like run through those things constantly, because I feel like you need to come to an interview again, all gas, no brakes. And that's something that I definitely like can improve on, as far as like not shying away from like saying everything that you can bring to the table.
I like that.
Okay, so kind of last question on the interview part. How do you guys feel like, okay, how do you walk away from knowing like, was that a good interview or was that a bad interview? And like, what is kind of like your mindset like when you walk away?
I feel like I can
Okay.
instantly tell.
How?
Yeah. I don't know. It's just it's weird. Like, once you nail an interview, you just know. Once you and the interviewer are like having a good conversation, and you're not looking at how much time has passed or what number question it is, etc., etc. I feel like you'll have a better job of actually getting the job. But if you're like, okay, this is question number 3, I've been in this interview for 15 minutes. Man, I don't know if they like me or not, etc., etc. If you're overthinking it, then it probably didn't go as well. That's how I kind of like
But
to go about it.
wait,
What
but
about
really
you,
quick,
Alyssa?
Didi,
Yeah,
to
go ahead,
that,
Jen.
like, haven't you walked away from interviews feeling like, wow, that was such a good interview, and then it like you didn't get the job? Or has that never happened to you?
100%. But it has, but that doesn't mean it wasn't a good interview. It was still a good interview. I bet you it was hard for them not to pick me. You know what I
Hey.
mean? Like they had to fight hard.
I'm sold.
I mean, let me see. Walking into an interview, we've all said it, you have to be prepared, right? But I can tell when I'm having a good interview when my answers are short and concise and I have a little bit of extra time. I don't want to say pick a conversation, but when I can start a conversation about something that myself and the interviewer have in common. So, like, again, it all goes back to the research, it all goes back to the preparation. But if I'm in an interview, in a panel interview with you guys, like, my first connection is, hey, we all went to Cal State Long Beach. Like, I can make a connection off of that because at the end of the day, you guys are going to see so many interviewers and you're going to hear so many different stories. But like when it comes down to looking at applications and you see Cal State Long Beach on mine and you remember my face because we had such a great conversation about how the student union just has the best food options, that's going to set me apart. And that's how I know, it was a good interview. The way that I know that it's a bad interview is if I'm not getting any feedback. Any feedback from the interviewer. And what's funny is that like I said, I'm in the interview process right now, and I had my first interview with, a director of the department, and she literally was like firing questions at me, one after another, and she straight up said, like, we have compatible, what is it? Very suitable applicants. So, and you have 8 questions and 30 minutes. Hand it to me. Like, just answers, fire and go,
Wow.
fire and go. And so as you're in that process, like, you just have to kind of react, right? And be quick with the answers because you only have 30 minutes to make the best impression. And if your answers are not short, concise, and what they want to hear, you may walk away without the job. And that's the way that I felt during that first round of interviews. But it can also, like you and Didi were just talking about, it can also go back to you had a really bad interview or you feel like you had a bad interview and it worked out for you. So it's just, you got to just come prepared. You got to be able to show a little bit of your personality, but at the same time, maintain that professionalism and know that you're an expert in what you're doing and you're not a fan, because that's also gonna, that's a whole nother topic that we can get into, but that's gonna set you apart. But what about you, Greg?
For me, how I know it's a good interview, this direct comment can be good or bad. So we'll be in touch, or you should be hearing back from us soon. So that can be on both sides of the spectrum. The other way for you to know that it went well is if the interviewer starts talking about themselves. I mean, that means that they're comfortable with you.
Everyone loves to talk
and
about
that kind of
themselves.
helps you. Right. So when they the ice breaks, and they are more comfortable, that's a way for them to remember you. And you guys might have something in common, or might know mutual people. And honestly, it's just a gut feeling, kind of what Didier said. Like, you'll know inside, and if you prepared, and if you really wanted the job, and you put your best foot forward, you'll walk out feeling confident. As far as a bad interview, I would just say the duration of it, how long it went. If it's too short, something's up. Uh, that means maybe you didn't have any questions to follow up with, or I always ask questions when they ask me, does anybody have any questions? I will ask questions such as, like, what does this position look like? What are you guys expecting that role, or what would that be on a day-to-day basis? What would that look like? So I can get an idea. If you're truly interested in applying for it. And lastly, it'll be a bad interview if you don't look the part. I feel like first impressions are everything. So if you feel good, you look good, dressing the part gives you, a different type of confidence, and honestly, since it's the first impression, not having to worry about that is already a step in the right direction. So that's what I would say, for good and bad on interviews.
Yeah.
How about you,
So,
Jen?
I think you guys hit all the main points as far as, like, what if it's a good interview, like hearing back, obviously, them being in communication with you. But for the bad interview, I also think it's important to remember, like, even though we're coming into the industry, we're all eager to get a job, like, we're also interviewing them, you know? So it's like, yeah, we want a job and we want to break into the industry, but like, I can now look back and say, like, I've had some bad interviews, but like from their end, you know, like I've literally dealt with people, like I was on a Zoom interview. They asked me the same question like back to back. And I was like, okay, like this is clearly, and I literally had to re-answer the question. So it's like, I just, needless to say, it's like, I think it's important to remember, like, you want to kind
Uh,
of, and obviously I wasn't the fit for them. And, like, I'm glad I wasn't now, but I'm just saying, like, in that moment, I was like, okay, even if you weren't interested, you were no longer interested in me as a candidate, like that's so disrespectful, like how does that look? An executive director like asking me literally the exact same question that like the manager just asked me back to back. Like we were all in the same Zoom. Like were you not like did you not it was crazy. But like I think that's important to remember too. Like we got to pick and choose when it comes to interviews. And like I know we're all eager and we want it, we want the job, we want the role, we want to like come our best, but also remember like you're interviewing them too, and the bad interview could come just as much from you like as it does from them. So I think that that's like important to remember. Okay, so I guess that wraps up our interview episode. I think we highlighted a bunch of great insights and tips. Thank you guys for coming on today, and I'm looking forward to the next episode. I hope you guys have a good Thanksgiving.